we need ego. We need ego to keep our shit in check. Because sometimes the ego is the voice that says, like, you're jumping out of your lane, like, calm down, stay in your lane. We've already been told over and over again to not believe what we see, like to not trust what's actually happening in front of you, which from my perspective is so dangerous because it really pulls you even further out of your own intuition. Like, if people don't believe what's happening with their own, like what they see with their own eyes, how are they ever going to be connected to their intuition? And now with the AI stuff, like, part of me is really excited for the good that can come of it, but we have very little regulation, very little ability to detect. And for sure, we're not using our intuition to detect what's real versus what is artificial. Anybody can do what I do. Everybody has an intuitive channel. Everybody has that intuitive muscle baked into their being. It's just a matter of training it, using it, working it for your benefit.
I just think they're higher dimensional beings. You know, we've decided that they are extraterrestrials. We put a label on it, just like we always do. Just like we pathologize every single symptom into that not really being what it is. It's just a showing of something deeper.
There is a close relationship between the spiritual and the emotional body. And so when one comes online, the other one does too. I love it. We're really going there today.
Yeah. Welcome to Grab Lies, everybody. I am your host, John Vargas. And just to start off with our disclaimer, I got to say this shit every single time, man. Everything we say and do on this podcast platform does not reflect the views of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. All right. I'm done with that. Cool. So for today, I have a very special returning guest, Lisa Mercier. Lisa is a clairvoyant. She's a psychic for police officers and firefighters. We did an episode back in January and we had such an interesting conversation. And every single time I meet with Lisa, she always teaches me something new about myself because I've had some very strange paranormal experiences on the job and off the job. So we talk about that stuff. It's a great episode. And, you know, it's really difficult to really brush up against people's belief systems with this stuff, but it's open and fun. And if you see it like that, it can be really fun podcast. There's a lot of strange things I've come across in my paranormal activity and things I've seen, including UFO sightings and experiences, which we get into on this episode. So please listen in on this fascinating episode. It is fun, and Lisa is such a great person. She's become a very, very good friend. So join us on this podcast episode. Take care, everybody. I love you very much.
It's time for Grab Lies.
We did a bunch of recordings for that. I did this intro song on this, whatever it's called, the Rodecaster Pro thing here. Mm-hmm. And you can press these little small, like, I don't know, voice changers. That was one of them.
Is that your voice?
Yeah, that's my voice.
Yes, that's amazing.
And there's like a couple other ones that I did, and I showed them to Haley, and we were like sitting there, and then, you know, I was like, hey, which one do you think sounds the best? She's like, that one.
Yeah.
And then I showed other people too, and yeah, it was pretty funny the way we chose that one.
I like it. It's like, it's hard, but it's also like a little spooky, a little like, what is this podcast?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And then my friend has a band, and they've been friends for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to use a song, but there's all these copyright issues, right? When you're going to use something for whatever platform, podcast right, or whatever. And so he sent me all his songs, and I just was finding the best song to do the intro. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
They have it's like a punk rock reggae band.
Fun.
You know, and I think we all grew up on that music, and it's pretty rad because I feel like rock and roll is fucking dead these days.
Exactly. I don't know who I was listening to talking about how music is so boring and different and uninspiring these days. And it's so true. It's so true.
Well, they even have AI making songs off like dead artists using their voices. It is crazy.
I know.
You know what I mean?
I know. Well, you like write a song that's, you know, sounds like, you know, whatever artist, and it's wild. It's so scary. It's so bothersome to me because we've already been told over and over again to not believe what we see, like to not trust what's actually happening in front of you, which from my perspective is so dangerous because it really pulls you even further out of your own intuition. Like if people don't believe what's happening with their own, like what they see with their own eyes, how are they ever going to be connected to their intuition? And now with the AI stuff, like part of me is really excited for the good that can come of it, but we have very little regulation, very little, ability to detect. And for sure, we're not using our intuition to detect what's real versus what is artificial. And it's so alarming.
Yeah, I think the whole point with that is like, well, if you can't beat them, join them.
Right.
So there has to be a realization for us as humanity to use AI for our better good and not be afraid of it, because the fear surrounding it is going to cause us to feel like we're victims to AI.
Right.
So I think the developers are the ones that need to have a bit more awareness around the subject and realizing, hey, we're not going to be like in this Terminator, apocalyptic era.
Right.
We actually use it to our advantage to where like, there's at some point where AI, connects directly to your thoughts, like turn left or turn right. And like the device, whatever, is going to be able to attune to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the Neurolink with, I mean, that's like, I'm excited for people that are paralyzed or they have other conditions where it would benefit them. But like, what are the bad actors going to do with that kind of thing? However, all to say, we'll adapt, we'll adjust. We can't be freaking out about something right now that's not present for us. Like we have too many things, we have too many avenues or too many factions of life to be afraid of. Like we can't also hold fear for this. Like we have to let that fear go and we'll adapt, we'll adjust, as it comes to be. It's otherwise life is too scary. Life is too fearful. Well, no one will ever leave their houses. So
yeah, just like the lockdown, right?
Right.
Everyone's
exactly.
just afraid to like get out and like,
exactly.
But with the Neuralink thing, the whole concept is like we're built like a computer, and all you're doing is you're entering a program into the system that can alter whatever physical issue you have, like if you're paralyzed or whatever. I think it's eye-opening to people to realize we are these organic computers and we can reprogram ourselves in a way. And, all the stuff we have to kind of look at internally for this, I guess, algorithm we're created with and designed for. Like it's just we're putting power outside of ourselves until we realize that we can do those things,
Exactly. So are you saying that the Neuralink isn't quite necessary? Like if we can train the body to do that anyway? Is that what you're...
I mean, I would hope that we have a capability to do that ourselves without having an external hardware to do that.
Yeah.
We have, I always was so fascinated and drawn to Dr. Joe Dispenza because he uses that same premise on how we can heal ourselves through thought. That's what he claims he did. He said he broke his back and he's a physician, so he knows how the anatomy works. And so he would sit on his couch and visualize his spinal cord and put the pieces back together for like hours until he was healed. That's truly amazing, right? He wrote all these books like The Supernatural Human, and he has these conferences where people are healing themselves with the power of thought, but more so in a space of frequency, right? He's like, go into that area of your body and bring a sense of gratitude. So you're altering the frequency with focus to that area of the body. And now that body's going to resonate off that frequency, that wavelength of, that gratitude or love or whatever, because that's how he's kind of figured this thing out at a conference level, getting people to be in a big group and they're doing it together. And I think when you get a big group of people to also do the same thing, you're combining, this idea, and people are bringing their belief systems in like a congregation form, right?
For sure. And then those frequencies get amplified because everybody is focused on it. Everybody's thinking about it. It makes sense. I haven't practiced hypnotherapy for a little bit, but I am a trained hypnotherapist, and people came to see me all the time for like back pain. Back pain was a huge one, shoulder injury. So it was all about kind of going in, kind of finding some unhealed emotional things, but then also visualizing, kind of bringing in healing into the body at the visualization level, and then transferring all of that imagery and energy and like the feeling of, I would always walk my clients through, imagine yourself post hypnotherapy, 3 months from now. What are you doing? What do you see in your mind's eye? What are you doing? And have them walk through out loud as much detail as they can about their day. And it doesn't have to be it's just a non-specific day. I wake up in the morning, how does it feel when you put your feet on the floor and you stand up? What is your back doing? Oh, my back feels loose. My back feels good. I don't feel any pain. And so we like walk you through, what does it feel like in your body to not have this pain? And not only does it, there's no physical pain, but people always would say, I feel really good. I feel confident. I feel comfortable in my body. I feel like I can trust my body. And it was all very emotional based. So we would do a lot of that kind of visualizing. What is feeling like you can trust your body actually feel like? And where do you feel that? And like grow that feeling, stretch that feeling, bring that feeling all up and down your body. And I found great success with that. So that makes a lot of sense. I think maybe the Neurolink can be a teacher for how to do that, but maybe it's not the end all be all of, how to reprogram, retrain the mind body connection. But it's fascinating to think about.
It's like I guess a ramp onto the next part of human evolution in a way. Mm-hmm. But greed, vanity, and power always comes to wreck the beautiful things we have.
Absolutely. Well, that's called balance. And as annoying as that is just how, that's the balance of where there's light, there's dark, where there's good, there's bad, or whatever words you want to use. But yes, that's why it's always got to, whether it's on a personal level, that's the ego that's going to keep that in check or run rampant. So you got to still kind of rein that in. Or from a bigger perspective, the power hungry, the ones that won't control. But we just know that. We have to know that going into whatever it is that we're trying to invent or create, or however it is that we're trying to live, there's always going to be an opposing energy. So part of your, part of the process of living in your truth or living in your light or however, whatever goal you're trying to achieve, you have to account for the opposing energy that's going to hit you and then kind of stand up to that even more.
Yeah, I've been contemplating the ego self the last couple weeks, but taking it to a deeper level. And I think, the ego is still an expression of the soul. It's part of us that it still is something we have to honor. If you try to run away from it or, think of it as dirty and ugly, that still requires an integration piece for how you show up in life. And I think for me personally, like my ego has helped me survive.
Right.
And took me to different portions of my life where it needed this motivation and like this gratification. So that is something that I think is like a kind of a misnomer of people understanding. And for the ego, there's a false sense of self that is kind of like integrated into that identity, right? Mm-hmm. And we protect our identities to the end, and that is kind of where the falsehood is being presented. We're attached to these identities, these false forms of who we believe we are. And as I went deeper into that concept, I just saw like there is a soul underneath that. And the soul is the truest form of myself that is actually feeding lessons through the false self that I'm supposed to walk through and understand. And I was just seeing like my truth in that, and this happened through a sense of deep meditation. I was just asking myself questions, and I would go into how I felt about, where I'd come at a blockade with myself. And when I came to this blockade, I was like really in a state of fear around my identity. Like I wanted to protect it. Why? Mm-hmm. Why did I want to do that? And then I realized, the soul is actually expressing through this false sense of self, but the lessons I'm here to learn is forgiveness. That is one of I believe my ultimate lessons I'm here to do, and I'm always going to come across things in my life and experiences because I look at my past and every single thing in my past has a lot to do with that. So
Right. I love what you said that about the ego. There's a lot of people in the spiritual community that say we have to kill the ego.
Right.
And I've never jumped on board with that. I think the ego we need ego. We need ego to keep our shit in check. Because sometimes the ego is the voice that says like, you're jumping out of your lane, like calm down, stay in your lane. So it kind of keeps us middle of the road, kind of secure, in our lane that we're supposed to be in. And then there are appropriate times where the ego needs to like flex to give us that sense of like, oh, I can do this. It's the drive that helps us do crazy things that our sort of normal self would never feel brave enough to do. And then the ego can go the other way and be reckless and, all about self, not connected to anybody else around. So we need that ego. It's also that ego part of us that really does keep us attached. My belief is the ego keeps us attached to the human form. Like we have our soul, that's our higher self, which is the governing part of this lower self, our body. And the soul is the one that's, pumping out guidance, giving us sort of insight into the experiences that we're having and the lessons that are here for us to learn if we choose it. The ego keeps us in the physical body. And so death to the ego means that we are then really ungrounded, like really detached and disconnected from the physical body. And if we're disconnected from the physical body, we're not going to receive information or insight or guidance from our higher selves, from our, guides and loved ones on the other side, from God. We're not going to receive it in a way that's effective enough for us to learn from it. So I think the ego is something that it's a little skewed with kind of the perception of the ego. We still have to stay and keep it in check, but the death to the ego, I don't believe in that. I think the ego keeps us like on track, on time, responsible. It kind of helps us go through those human tasks of living that we have to do, going to work, paying our bills, following laws. The ego is necessary, super, super necessary, but you have to be, I would say, balanced enough, mind, body, spirit, to know when to override the ego and when to listen to the ego. So it still takes a very connected person to be able to work with the ego the way that it's intended to work with.
Yeah, you bring up such a good point to listen. Like that practice has proven to me of how important it is to be in a state of stillness, to operate within kind of understanding and organizing these different parts, because I ultimately think it's a shedding process. And I started realizing it after a while. I was like, man, this is like more of like parts of me that just want to leave in a way, and they're making noise. It's just making more noise because it knows it's not going to exist any longer. And I think through my own healing process, I've noticed even with my physical imbalances, as I changed and altered my total vibration of who I am, stuff was coming off, but it pushes itself to the surface in order for it to make itself known before it wants to leave. And usually with like viruses, if we're talking about we're this organic computer, something at a virus state, it usually wants to take down the host. So that's why people who go through these experiences in life, who make big changes, they can go through this kind of fight with their demons because of this wrestling match, wanting to survive, these things wanting to kill the host, and you're just like at war for a second. And then when you're using the art of listening in that stillness, it just falls off, but it has to be a very, very disciplined practice. And I think as I would increase in my journey of life and really taking a conscious effort and that self-awareness, like as I would listen, these gifts would come through, like these innate gifts that I had. And this is why I wanted you to come on here to talk about some of these like paranormal psychic abilities, because I realized some of this stuff that was dormant within me started to unleash. And at first it was a bit frightening, and I didn't know what to do with it until I had people teach me about, exactly what is going on. And one of my teachers had explained to me that we have ordinary gifts or abilities, special abilities, And then you have realization and wisdom. So if you can integrate all three of these aspects, or all four of those aspects of the self, you still have to honor these special abilities and realize that they are tools for you to use. And I actually, the realization I had was that it's kind of like a pet. Like you have like a dog or a cat, and you can't let that dog run rampant and start shitting and pissing in your house, right? You have to, show it the way,
right,
and kind of be a guiding force to how that's going to show up in your life. So I definitely like for you to kind of talk about the clairs, because some people have a misunderstanding of what the clairs are. And if you can kind of break it down in a way, how that works.
I would love to. It's something I talk a lot about with my clients. I get a lot of people who see me, they'll come for mediumship. So mediumship is communicating with loved ones on the other side. And then they leave with, this sense of, oh my gosh, I can do a version of that myself, and I just didn't know it. And so I spend a lot of my time teaching my clients about what I do, because I am also a believer that anybody can do what I do. Everybody has an intuitive channel. Everybody has that intuitive muscle baked into their being. It's just a matter of training it, using it, working it for your benefit. And so the clairs are essentially, we'll talk about them all, but think of, clairvoyance. Everybody's heard of clairvoyance. So when I say clairs, we're going to be referring to what I call the language of energy. So energy in any form, whether it's coming from God speaking through you, whether it's your higher self giving you information, your guides, your loved ones on the other side, they're going to be pumping that information down into your body, and then it kind of delivers the message through these outlets. And so the clairs are the outlets that the information is coming. It's through your body and out. So, for example, we'll start with clairvoyance, since that's the most common. Clair, C-L-A-I-R, is French, meaning clear. So clairvoyance is at our third eye, and it means clear seeing. So it's seeing information, energy, getting messages from the universe, from spirit, from your higher self by way of sight. So whether you are, some people will use their third eye and they will physically see things out of body, as if, we'll just use the example of mediumship. Let's say you see an apparition, you see like an outline standing at the foot of your bed. That's really extreme clairvoyance, but a lot of people have that ability. It might present itself more subtly, where you might see kind of things out of the corner of your eye that get you to look and nothing's there. You see little orbs, you'll see maybe a flash of light. The mechanism of the clairvoyant ability is to help you see with not just your physical eyes, but with your spiritual eye. And the other component to the clear seeing is, if you take a snapshot of your life, if you're trying to figure out, like, where do I start? What's going on in my life? What do I need to do to kind of make myself feel better or heal myself, whatever it is? And you take a snapshot of your life. It isn't just what you see in that snapshot image that's important. It's what you're not seeing. That's also important. And that when our clairvoyance really comes online and we're working with it, you can begin to get messages, guiding information from what you don't see. And so I always like to tell people, pay attention to what's missing and glean some information as much as you can from that, because often there's a reason that is so prominent to you that you're noticing that it's not there. Pay attention to that, and then bring into your life what that thing was that's missing. So clairvoyance is probably the most common. And then we've got all these other clairs that we'll talk about. And think of all the clairs as, we have our physical senses. We have our ability to see, smell, taste, hear, feel, all those things. We also have the spiritual senses. So they often will align. So we have clairvoyance, clear seeing. Let's now start at the top. We kind of went out of order, but we'll go. We'll get back there. I always like to start with clairvoyance because it's the most common, commonly heard and misunderstood. But then we, at the top of our crown chakra, we have claircognizance. So remember, clair is clear. So clear knowing. So that's where you get intuitive information, spiritual guidance by way of thought. So a thought pops in your head. You don't know where it came from, but it's there. It's that feeling that you just know something, but you don't know how you know it, but it's in your body. You know it. That's claircognizance. That's one of my primary. We all have primary clairs. So we have clairs that our body kind of is innately good at. One of my primary clairs is claircognizance. So when I was little, I was often called a know-it-all. I was, I always asked questions about rules. I would follow the rules, but I wanted to know why, because I always knew that there was a different way to do something. And it wasn't just that I was a rebellious kid. It was that I truly knew this rule is bullshit. Like, I know a better way to keep people in line, or I know a better way to, do this or whatever it was. And so claircognizance is that you know what you know, but you're not sure how you know it. And it almost doesn't matter because you're so convicted by it that you know it to be so. So now what comes into play with claircognizance is the need to develop discernment, because you have to learn what is my own thought, what is my own opinion, what's my own reaction versus what is true information dropping down into my body from spirit, from the universe that's coming into my mind. And though they feel very different, and you get good at that by practicing.
Yeah.
By practicing. I mean, that's how you flex that muscle. That's how you strengthen that muscle. So that's claircognizance. We did clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, the third eye. We have clairaudience, clear hearing. So that is receiving spiritual information, intuitive information by way of sound. So you might hear a sound that is not being produced by anything around you and, sort of the physical space that you're in. Oftentimes that comes through as ringing of the ear. For people that are about to receive a message, it'll start with the ringing, high-pitched ear ringing. Now, I don't want to tell people across the board, every time your ear rings, it's not a medical issue. It might be, so always go and check. But quite often, it's your team in spirit trying to, I say to people that anytime your ear rings, for me, it means there's a message incoming that I need to be paying attention to. So I consider my ear when it rings as the doorbell, and then I have to go answer the door. So then I say, okay, I know a message is coming. I'm ready to receive it. If I don't do that, I don't hear a message. So that means I just didn't answer the door. They were ringing the doorbell, but I just didn't answer. So I rejected the message that was meant for me in that moment. Because sometimes I can't. I'm busy. I'm doing something else. I can't go, okay, what's my message? But they'll bring it back. If it's really important for you to hear, they'll always bring it back. So often when I'm doing a session with somebody, I'll be giving them a message, whether it's an intuitive reading, a psychic reading, or mediumship, or if I'm doing Reiki on somebody and I'm supposed to pay attention to a message that spirit is about to deliver to me that I then have to share, my ear will often start to ring really loudly so that I don't miss it. So sometimes the ringing gets louder and louder. You're not going crazy. It's not your tinnitus flaring up if you've already made sure that you don't have that issue. That means that they're really wanting you to pay attention. So you have to answer that door. You have to, and that's not the only way that clairaudience comes in. Oftentimes, like, I'll hear laughter. It's, by the way, my examples are going to sound like I have multiple personalities, and I'm very aware of that. That's fine. I've had this gift since I was a little girl, so I'm used to it. I'll hear laughing, I'll hear screaming sometimes, I'll hear music playing, I'll hear all kinds of things that are not, it's not happening in my physical space. So I know it isn't. I call them spirit sounds because they're not from my home or where I'm at. They're internally in my head. I can hear, the sounds. And so again, that's discernment. That's first always figuring out what could possibly be producing that sound around me. And if I'm not finding anything, then I'm just going to ask, okay, what's the message here? What do I need to know about the laughing that I'm hearing in my head? What do I need to know about? And oftentimes it's, a client that I'm about to meet, it's their loved one that's already starting to connect with me. Or if it's my own life, it's a word or a phrase that's going to bring meaning into my life in that moment that I have to be paying attention to. So the sounds that we hear can be really guiding. Or if you're in a meditation and you're really wanting to connect with a guide or just your own soul in a different way, be open to whatever you hear and don't reject it. Don't judge it. Just go, all right, well, that's odd. I asked in this moment to connect with my spirit guide and my floor creaked. Maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe that's the energy shifting. And it's okay to kind of go with it. And even though you feel like you're imagining it, you're making it up, that's okay. Go with it. Because what you're doing is you're practicing holding the space for when you're meant to really understand that ability that you have. But very rarely does spirit just show up for you or the universe just kind of give you this like undeniable sign. They're going to work with you little by little by little. But if you're rejecting, every time the floor creaks, no, it's just the floor. Well, then you're never going to expand in your ability because sometimes it is the energy shifting that happened to make the floor creak. And if you were really in tune and ready, there would be a part of you that said, okay, I'll accept that this might be it. And thank you for bringing me that message by way of sound. So after clairaudience, we've got clairalience, which is clear smelling. So spirit smells. So we're smelling things that are not being produced by anything around us. So you can smell all kinds of things. It's a big one for people who are, it's interesting. I find people that are previously rejecting mediumship or brand new to kind of like understanding and being curious about it. A lot of times their loved ones will produce smells for them. Lotions, perfumes, smoke, like cigarette smoke, pot smoke, barbecue. I always smell food when I'm doing mediumship readings. And half the time it's like, it's so delicious. It's so strong. It makes my stomach growl. It actually convinces my own body that I'm hungry. We can smell all kinds of things. And it's intuitive information by way of smell, spirit information by way of smell. So it's a unique one. But a lot of people that'll be kind of the first thing that they start to recognize as a sign that their loved one is leaving. I swear, I know I'm crazy. I know I sound crazy, but I'm smelling their body wash or I'm smelling, whatever. And it's really, really common. And that's your person on the other side trying to connect with you in a really subtle way. That's your own higher self trying to get you to pay attention to the fact that you're sensitive enough to capture a smell that's not being produced by something, on earth. It's amazing. Underneath the smell, the clear smelling, we have clairgustation, clear tasting. So very similar to the smell, we start to taste things that are often associated with a loved one on the other side. Yes, we can get tastes for things kind of for guidance for our own lives. For example, let's say your body wants you to start eating, I don't know, let's say you've been taking a break from red meat. And all of a sudden, this actually happened to me. For years, I was really grossed out by red meat. And I had eaten meat my whole life. And then I had this period of like 4 years where I just didn't want red meat. And I started to taste it. And I was like, what? This is so weird. I haven't. At first, it was gross. I didn't want it. I've always liked this. I've always loved it. Like I said, I've always liked the smell of like meat cooking, but I just didn't want to eat it. And then I started to taste it over and over and over again. And finally I was like, all right, fine. I'll get meat and I'll make myself a steak. And now it's been a few years and I've been back to eating meat. So I feel like that was my body's way of telling me, hey, we're ready for this now. We're back into, we need the nutrients or we need you to start to eat this. And so we might get guiding information for our own cells by way of taste. So pay attention. Or if you like taste, a metallic taste in your mouth, or you taste, something sour, there could be an imbalance there. Or you're beginning to receive signs from a loved one on the other side that is connected to something that they like to eat or hated eating, but they're just trying really hard to get your attention in that way. So you'll start to taste it. It's really interesting. One more. I'm like trying to go down my list.
How many are there total?
Claire, hold on, we have to count. Claircognizance, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairalience, clairgustation, and then clairsentience. So 6. Clairsentience is the most common clair with empaths. so highly sensitive people. Clairsentience means clear feeling. So you receive intuitive information, spiritual information by way of feeling in your body. And that translates into emotions or physical aches or pains. And so essentially your body is such an excellent receiver of energy that it then kind of takes the information that's out there and it applies it to your own self, and it'll make you feel sad. It'll make you feel anxious. It'll make you have a knee ache. It'll, make you feel, happy or ecstatic for a split second. That's because the energy kind of just hit your system, amplified that clair in your body, and is trying to get you a message through that feeling that it's giving you. So empaths, that's why for empaths, it's so important, number one, to understand what an empath is and how it affects you. But number two, we have to get rid of that energy once it passes through us. Because even the happiness that I'm feeling, let's say I'm doing a reading for somebody and they've got something really beautiful happening in their life and it makes my body feel really good. Well, I love that feeling, but the feeling is not mine. And so I have to get it out of my system. I like the feeling. And in fact, I'll tell my body, let's find things for ourselves that bring about that happiness, because I really want to hold that. But I want to make sure I'm holding my happiness, not someone else's. If I'm only holding someone else's, I have no room in my system to hold my own. So empaths really have to stay on top of clearing, doing a lot of energy clearing practices, energy protection practices, so that they are able to hold their own joy, hold their own health and healing and happiness and love and all of that good stuff. And the body is a really beautiful gauge for perfecting life. So if I'm in a situation and my body feels nervous, like we'll just use this as an example. If I go somewhere new and I feel like I can feel my human nerves, I know what that feels like. But then I feel the energy of the situation, and the energy is, this is brand new. Then my ego kicks in, like, hope you don't fail. Like, this is a really cool experience, whatever it is. It's a lot of energy. Instead of rejecting all of that and kind of saying like, no, I'm an empath, I'm going to have that energy stay away, it's appropriate to kind of let that energy move through you for the purpose of receiving any insight that those feelings can bring me. Like, remember to breathe, or ground yourself so that you can be present, or you've worked really hard for this moment, so enjoy it. Like some of those higher vibrational messages that my team in spirit wants me to hear in that moment. So those energies need to pass through my clairsentient system so that I can extract some of the messages, and then I can release the feeling from my system and just go, okay, well, I am going to ground myself and I'm going to be present in this moment to really absorb the goodness that is here, or whatever it is. So the purpose of the clairs, all of them, is to get that spiritual information into our body and to receive the messages, receive the lessons, the guidance, the way that they are intended for us. And so we really owe it to ourselves to strengthen. And from my perspective, it's all our intuitive channel. The intuition is not just, guidance. It's not just a gut feeling. It's a channel. And along that channel is our clair, all the clairs, claircognizance, clairvoyance, all of them, all 6 of them. And so, something that you said before I went on this track about clairs was, you've been really feeling that push or that desire to explore your own spiritual gifts. And what I find to be the case with every single person I've worked with, either they come to me and it's their first, experience kind of dealing with anything spiritual. And then that kind of opens the door for them, and they learn more about it. They come to see me more often. They're practicing a lot of spiritual things on their own. And then the emotional stuff turns on and asks to be healed. And so then lots of my clients are like, oh, I got a therapist, or I got, now I'm seeing this, bodywork professional, or whatever it is. It's because the emotional body then asks to be healed when the spiritual side kicks in, or vice versa. I see somebody who has been in therapy for years, working on themselves, and this spiritual side keeps nagging at them to kind of explore. There is a close relationship between the spiritual and the emotional body. And so when one comes online, the other one does too. So I really like talking about this with you and here because people who are down that road of healing their emotions and healing their stuff, I don't want anybody to be surprised when they feel like their intuition gets sharper or they're seeing things or they're hearing things or you're not crazy. That's your spiritual body going, okay, good. You finally are processing your emotions. Now we have room. Now we have room to grow and expand in you. So I encourage people to embrace that as part of it's all a part of the healing. And remember, we are just returning to that state of alignment, mind, body, spirit. We can't have mind and body without spirit. And so this is who we are supposed to be. This is who we are meant to be, is a human being that is in close relationship with their intuitive side.
Totally agree with that. There's so many points, when you're talking, so much comes up. It's
Interrupt
crazy.
me next time. I don't have to talk.
No, I wanted you to explain, all these things, they're great. It's just, going through my own path, I think I had a crash and burn process. Mm-hmm. I know I had a crash and burn process where even one of my teachers was telling me, you're going to go through a really rapid process of just crash and burn, and things are going to leave, things are going to come into your life, and your body's going to go through a really rough time. So just be patient, and you got to ride the roller coaster. And when you're riding the roller coaster, put your hands up because there's nothing else you can do. Like surrendering to that process was a part of my path. And I think over the course of time, I had a greater awareness of my path of life through spirituality. I just knew that I didn't want to open that door because I didn't want to change my behaviors. One of them was my addictions. I didn't want to change that. And, through that's why I had a crash and burn process, because I knew the path was there and I didn't take it. And so when it was time to take it, I was forced into it by life experiences because I wasn't listening and I wasn't being intuitive to my inner sense of knowing. So when all these things happened, it really felt like I was going insane. I started having these weird experiences where people started talking to me and having double talk, like where they would say something and I would hear their thoughts, or I'd be in a very large group of people and I would hear everyone's thoughts. It was, at first it was fearful for me because I didn't know what was going on, and everything just unlocked all at once, which was really hard for me to take on at once, with not realizing these were gifts, not realizing these were things that I had dormant within me, because a lot of this is kind of a remembering of who we are. It's not like you're just gaining these things out of nowhere. It's the soul unlocking these capabilities that we all carry. So as I started to realize, it's just these things I'm and it felt like I was remembering, like, oh wow, this is like something I've always had. I just was afraid of it. And so when I stopped approaching it with fear, it really opened up more of those gifts to start harnessing the capacity to hold the space it was creating. And when the space was created, that's when things started getting pushed outwardly, like all of the negative belief systems, all of the emotions that I carried internally. It was just like everything was just all at once. And I'm lucky and fortunate enough to have a teacher or teachers who've taught me this stuff that was coming up for me, On top of that, there was some things that I was studying, because I always studied ancient cultures, and realizing they've understood and mastered this stuff beyond our age of where we're living in now, right. And so some of the stuff you're talking about reminds me of some of the stuff I've learned through ancient cultures. So even through the ancient Egyptian cultures, they use this, our energy centers, our map of who we are, and understood that these softwares were holding information that gives us the intuition from different levels of our being. And there was this, there's an energy center above the head that they called the Ka, Ka. And that's what they said. They received information from the universe or source or whatever you would call it. It came in through that area, that energy center, that software. That's how they would get this inner knowing of anything, you know.
Wow.
And that's how they were able to, you know, create a civilization that was so, I guess, magnificent, you know. So some of these things were so fascinating to me, and I knew bits and pieces of this stuff by just reading so many different books and coming across these different factors, but a lot of them had the same algorithm and same information, which is really great to see that, you know. So with all of these gifts, I've noticed when I'm at work, it gets really challenging for me to use them, not use them, but it definitely disturbs my lifestyle at work, you know. So I can give an example is like, I started seeing beings around me. And the first time I've had a really significant experience with that is I woke up out of a nap and I saw this like bright light being. It looked like an angel of some sort in front of the foot of my bed. And it freaked me out. And I was like, what is this? What is going on? And then telepathically, this being started speaking to me. And so I started kind of asking myself, is this real? Am I making this up? I just woke up out of bed. Am I dreaming? I didn't know how to make sense of this. But ever since that moment, it got more strong while I was at work. And I had to finally say, hey, I need to stop this. I have to work because I was on a call one time and this guy was dying in the ambulance with me. And I felt this presence of, I don't know if it was like his spirit guides or something on my shoulders, like hovering over me.
Wow.
As I was working on this person. And this had to have been like 3:00 in the morning or something like that. And so I remember the feeling of how intense it was for me because it felt like a vibration was on my back and I didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? I was doing the best I could to help this man survive. And it comes to find that later that person did survive. Later down the road, I found out this person actually, who I thought was going to die and was circling the drain, ended up living.
Wow.
So it was a great experience, but at the same time, it was invading my privacy as I'm doing my job. So after talking with some of my teachers and them telling me, hey, no one has power outside of you. You have complete control over what's invading your space and what you allow into your presence, into your field. And so you have to have the commanding presence, number one, and begin to command these things to let them know your boundaries and what can come in and what cannot come in. So as I started to kind of, I guess, cultivate the way I wanted to have these gifts come up while I'm at work, began to see it is how you have that commanding presence. And even though I have these gifts, they have to be definitely honed in on my, three-dimensional life experience.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like the stuff that came up for me when you were talking to me. I was like, man, I went through so much in so little time and it was hard to manage, but it became fun after a while. And I realized there is no fear attached to this. Now I can actually play with it and experience life from this paranormal thing outside of the five senses. So it becomes really, really interesting as I walk this life and see my gifts, because one of my major gifts is inner vision. Mm-hmm. And the first time I started realizing that was animals would come into my meditation. And I didn't know why animals were coming through my meditation, but it was actually a message being shown through an animal or a totem. So I had one of my teachers explain to me, you need to research you can Google Native American animal totem medicine. And usually there is a special message from that animal that presents to you why it's coming into that part of your life and the message it truly is trying to show you. And so I realized that, and I still get that, animal totem experience, because even when I see animals kind of flying that are kind of rare or in some sense, I'm like, oh, wow, that is a message of this or whatever, because I've known different animals and their messages they're showing. So that was another thing I came across, and then I think after a while, the sentient feeling with my emotional body was really really intense for me because I have a major connection to my emotional body and how it manifests in physical pain. So I really had to get in to understanding that part because I was living in pain, and a lot of it was just dormant emotional wounding that I need to look at and to realize, what was this teaching me as apart from, how can I get rid of this pain? It had to be a perspective shift within myself to see, okay, this is actually showing me something that's in there. How can I unlock this and use the vehicle of the emotional body to find the healing that has really been just knocking at my doorstep, which is, I'm still learning, a lot with that one because it's a journey with understanding the wounds, obviously these things that are just dormant within me that needs healing and really requires me to integrate it in my life and to see myself fully with these ancient eyes rather than this dirty perspective that I need to just sweep these things under the rug. And that's a lot of what people treat this as when they're walking through life. They go to a doctor and they want to get surgery or cutting into the body and then fixing it that way. I don't believe that. I don't believe that's the approach. Our bodies are so intelligent and they want to have us listen. And it's been so hard to do it. It's not an easy process. And I hope people really understand that there's something beyond us that we have failed to listen to. And I think we've just are barely scraping the surface as a collective of humanity to realize how powerful we are. And I think one of the benefactors, and this is kind of the segue into something else, was growing up for me, I heard all this stuff and it was demonized in my life through religion and these limiting belief systems saying it's satanic, it's demonic, it's bad to have these abilities. And the only reason why is because I had a aunt, my grandmother's sister, who was psychic. And she was a famous psychic, and she was on Regis and Kelly all the time, and she was a famous hairdresser. I mean, she cut hair from like Jimi Hendrix to Michael Jackson to all these people.
Wow, that's fun.
Yeah, and she was a beautiful person, and she was full of light and love. But my grandmother hated her, and she demonized her, saying, "Oh, she's into satanic rituals because she's psychic." And I just remember when I was around 6 years old hearing this, and I didn't understand why, because she was such a loving person. And I always loved her. And so I didn't understand why she would do that to her and just slander her, in front of me. And it changed my perspective on her. And I just remember like feeling that I didn't believe that was true, and thinking that psychic abilities, whatever she did, was bad, And I just remember I was honestly taught, I just beat with the stick, teaching me that it was bad when I didn't really believe it. You know what I mean? I
have a very similar experience. I grew up Christian. So imagine, I'm 4 years old is my earliest memory of seeing a spirit. Knowing right away that this person was not alive, and also recognizing really quickly that people around me couldn't see what I was seeing. And then 2 separate youth group pastors at church that I went to. One was in middle school and the next one was in high school. Middle school, I went with my mom because I was just visited all the time by light and dark beings. So it was a lot of scary. We should do a separate episode where I just tell you all the scary, crazy ghost stories of my life. But a lot of them were very beautiful beings that I was being visited by. But I was a kid. I didn't want any of it. I was afraid of all of it because I was, told that this was the devil and this was the devil. And so only to have 2 pastors tell me, at age 11 or 12, that I must not have Jesus. I must not have accepted Jesus into my heart, that I must not be praying hard enough, that it is my fault. So then I, am trying even harder to pretend that this doesn't exist. And then a couple of years later, work up the courage to ask another pastor, hey, I'm a really good person. I don't do anything bad. I get good grades. I go to church all the time. I volunteer. And the lights flicker every time I walk into the room. Or, these things happen all the time. Or I can see an angel. I know what an angel looks like. I don't know if did you mean it when you asked Jesus to come into your heart? And it's like, oh. So that was part of my process of healing and accepting my gifts, was to forgive these people that meant well, but grew up and were conditioned in their own limiting beliefs. And so it is a huge thing to work through, getting out of the conditioning and the programming. We are conditioned. No matter how good of a childhood you think you have, you were brought up in under a set of conditions. And so moving outside of that is really confronting to the system, because our system loves stability, loves sameness, routine. And so anytime we are seeking something else, it's going to be we're going to have fear. We're going to be judging it. We're going to have doubt. But the truth is, like you said, we're returning to our spiritual nature. When you're little, every child, the veil is thin. Every single baby, every single child can see spirit, can communicate with spirit. And really, that's how we are meant to continue living. But it gets programmed out of us, whether it's, the grandmother that is labeling it satanic, or your church that's labeling it, demonic, or your parents that are agnostic and have no, they don't believe anything. And so it must just be your imagination. No, that's actually the state that we all should be continuing to live in. It's just not fostered. It's not nurtured. There's no teaching about how to control it, how to protect yourself, how to set the energetic boundary so that you're not getting visited by things that are, less than light, as I call them. So we really owe it to ourselves, first of all, to remember it for self, return to it for yourself, return to the spiritual abilities for yourself, and then teach your kids, teach young people what an empath is, how energy hits our system, how our intuition works, and how to trust it, how to practice trusting it. Because really that intuitive center is the only center that we need to be listening to, not our logical center, not our emotional center.
I'm scared. You said the word trust, which is super important with these things.
Things.
Right? Like, so trust is the key to the universe. And that trust is like this divine, absolute inner knowing. And as you begin to trust through this process, there are levels to it. And trust is unconditional. The moment we put conditions on trust, it's a part of that false self coming through and putting a label on it and stopping it where it's becoming a linear factor, when trust is not a linear thing. It's an never-ending thing. It's no beginning or end for trust. So the more you graduate through, the channel of trust, the more stuff comes through for you to be able to hold. You're creating more space, and you're being gifted with more abilities and more of this process for yourself to hold the superhuman nature of what we're designed to be. And trust has been such a huge theme for me the last few years, because as I would graduate through trust, I would receive more as I stopped having the mind come into like the disturbance of how I'm receiving information. I can give an example is like, I really just wanted my mind to be at peace. That's why I started meditation. And as I realized when I started to meditate, the thoughts would just dissipate quicker. There would be more clarity. And in that space of clarity, that's when information would come through like this knowing of myself. Like there's something in there that came through and I knew it. And it kept reoccurring through this process of trust, and I gained a relationship with it. And so an example I'm trying to say is I kept meditating every day. I mean, I still meditate because it brings peace to me, and I get to have more information come through. So one time I was meditating, and me and Haley were trying to look for a place to live. And I had this direct message after I had this clarity and meditation: you're going to move in December. And I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. And I'm very skeptical as a person in general too. You know what I mean? I don't believe everything I hear or see either. I also eat the meat and spit out the bones. I tell this to Haley all the time. But it resonated deep within my system. And so I was like, okay, let's wait. And this was about a few months prior. And so sure enough, we got this beautiful home that we have now, and it landed right on December 1st.
Wow.
And we got this house. And this is just an example of stuff that can come through when you clear the mind and you clear all this trash that's always in your head. And I just really want to send a message to people to be careful with what you're feeding your mind also, because your mind is just replaying what you feed it. So that you're constantly on your phone. Your screen time is up 6 hours a day. Okay, you're feeding yourself all this this subliminal messaging through this programming. What we have, it's a program that's always running. And so how can you have a place of clarity when you're programming shit in your mind all the time? That's the whole point of this, to keep a distraction within humanity so we don't have these superhuman abilities and we feel like we're not in power within ourselves to take advantage of the superhuman self of who we're designed to be. Now, we can talk about more because that's a whole nother podcast as well of talking about the outside influences to keep people trapped and encaged. And when you're able to break free of that, that is the whole point of this human experience, to unleash this process of what's lying dormant within and getting past these conditionings and these programmings that have kept us entrapped, kept humanity entrapped for such a long time. And I really feel like it's time for everyone to awaken to that inner sense of the self, But I think the more I began to trust, more bizarre things started to happen.
Right.
So as these more bizarre things started to happen, I would go to my teachers. They go, okay, I have this really strange incident that happened at a waking dream at 3 o'clock in the morning. And what is going on? And so one of my teachers explained to me, one, you have to realize there is realization and wisdom imbued inside of you. So you have to use that discernment like you were talking about before. But don't judge it. Take it for what it's worth. And so this beings would come to me in my, sleep, and they would start teaching me stuff and be quick within 3 minutes, done. Go back to sleep. And be like, okay, I don't know what's going on here. Okay. And it kept happening. It came to the point where extraterrestrials would do the same thing. So these extraterrestrial experiences became really bizarre. And so I thought I was going crazy until I went to my teacher again. I was like, hey, I got ETs making connections to me, okay, and I don't know what's going on. Can you explain? And so she had told me that through her own, she's like, okay, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to tell you about my own experience. I had these two people coming to me all the time. And there were these two men in black type figures. And she was like, I didn't understand what it was. And so she had to make a relationship with them. First of all, she had to ask, hey, what are you doing here? And I need to get some sleep. I don't have time for this. So they'd go away. And so she started gaining a relationship with these teachers, essentially. And all they were doing is teaching her about her life. And as soon as she engaged and had that commanding presence and used discernment, then it became a teacher-student type relationship. And so I was like, okay, so what are you telling me? She's like, well, use your discernment. And if you want to continue with it, possibly being a teacher or possibly being an energy, talk to it and command that presence.
Yes. That's it. That's what you have to do. And it goes back to what you said a minute ago that I wanted to touch on. We don't have to be afraid to open this door. First of all, the door is already open. We've just chosen, depending on your level of, spirituality, where you're at on your path, the door is already open, like meaning the energy already exists. You just haven't attuned yourself to it yet. So, because people always come to me, and there's a handful of people that are afraid, but curious, afraid, but they want to explore. And they're like, I don't want to open a door, to darkness, or because of that old programming, which I get it. I was there too. I was absolutely there. But the energy, the frequencies, beings, entities, those exist, whether you are attuned to them and can see them or feel them or sense them or not. The door's already open. You don't have to worry about that. You are more powerful than any outside energy. So you get a say in your development. You have a voice and you have the ability to set boundaries with any being, with even your higher self that's trying to either help you heal, help you, bring some of your spiritual gifts online. You have a voice. That was the biggest thing for me when I was in the early years of my spiritual development, because I was so afraid of ghosts. I was so afraid of ETs. I have so many UFO sightings that we can talk about that. But I was just so afraid. And so when I learned I actually have a voice and I can command them to leave or to not do it so intensely or to not show up in my room at 3 a.m, I'm allowed to make those boundaries. So that is a huge component to this. And I really want people to understand that. You don't have to be afraid because you can say no, go away at any point. You can control the flow, essentially, which by itself is a very healing thing, a very healing place to be, to realize that I have a voice, which is really the truth in every circumstance in our life. We have a say in what happens to our system. And you're right. You have the opportunity there to say, all right, ETs, you keep visiting me. You're not going away. Obviously, there's something here. I'm going to confront you. I'm going to say, I'm going to let myself first and foremost feel the energy. Your body will tell you if this is an energy that is in alignment with you, essentially light energy, or an energy that's lower vibrational or negative or dark energy. Your body will tell you. And it's a very different feeling from fear. Fear is a total human feeling. When it's an energy that you shouldn't be entertaining, your whole system will let you know. It will hit you very differently than fear. And everybody has kind of their own tell for when an energy is not in the light. I have a very specific tell. Your system will let you know. So you can be surprised, you can be shocked and a little like, oh, there's some ETs at the foot of my bed, or there's some ETs in my meditation. Like, this is new, but don't confuse newness or shock with that it's a negative energy. So you can ask it, okay, you're here. Thanks for showing yourself. What are you about? What do you have to say? What are you here to show me? And then let your body be that guide. Is this an energy that's in alignment with me in the light or no? And if it's no, get it out. All you have to say is, you leave now. You have to go. That's it. It will leave. And then if it does feel good, if it does feel safe, they will then begin to guide you, give you messages, give you some wisdom, give you some type of a healing. And they'll bring in, often really impactful wisdom.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I mean, you're essentially asking questions.
Yes.
So, which is great, because you're going to get an answer if you're going to ask questions directly. So if you don't ask questions, you're not going to get answers. That's like just plain and simple. But and the benefactor of ETs, I have so many different viewpoints on, who we are as humans and ET involvement with all that. But I can go there. So my belief is that
I was just going to say, what do you think? What are ETs in your opinion?
I just think they're higher dimensional beings. We've decided that they are extraterrestrials. We put a label on it, just like we always do. Just like we pathologize every single symptom into that not really being what it is. It's just a showing of something deeper. And so higher dimensional beings are just like, it's funny because I always ask a rookie. I mess with rookies all the time because they're really stressed out, and they need to have the ice broken sometimes. Mm-hmm. To just let them laugh, and just also and then after I break the ice, one of those questions are, hey, do you believe in aliens? And a lot of times they get caught off guard, be like, what? This guy's asking me aliens? I'm trying to do this job.
How do I answer this?
But we're living together, you know what I mean? And like they sleep in my dorm, you know what I mean? I want to get to know the person. And a lot of times they're like, no, I don't, unless I see it. I'm like, oh, okay, well, the answer is wrong. Aliens are interdimensional. They're already among us. Mm-hmm. That's the answer I always give them. So it's kind of funny messing with them in a sense, but aside from that, the higher dimensional beings, they are already here. It's just that we can't see them because we're operating off a different wavelength. So when you can elevate yourself to a higher dimension, usually when you silence all the noise in your head, you can uplift your vibration to be in that resonance of being able to see them. And so that's my belief on how that presents because I've experienced it by raising my vibration, my totality of it all. So through this experience, I really believe there's a lot of fear involved with extraterrestrials. There's like the movie Alien by Ridley Scott. It's a horror film. You know what I mean? So I think that's a programming by the government that wants to keep us from being in fear, to not even connecting to, higher dimensional beings. When, I think the CIA has already known, and there's been this cosmic disclosure with ETs. They've already known about this.
Oh, yeah.
And we're still saying it's not true.
We're still calling people crazy.
Yeah.
We're still doubting sworn testimony
Right.
from military members and researchers. We're still calling them crazy. Do you think they're higher dimensional beings or interdimensional beings?
I think there's different levels.
Okay.
Just like when you're in school, there's a kindergarten class, and then you go to high school, there's the seniors. And so a lot of times I believe that, this is what my teacher had told me, that these visits you keep getting are these people from senior class coming to be a TA in your class because they got to gain credit in their own process of evolution. So when you're being presented with this, they're just teaching you, they're helping you along your process to graduate to 9th grade, to 10th grade, to 11th grade, right?
Right.
And so in that sense, we have to see this vessel, this avatar we're in, as a learning process. And we're here to graduate. And this process, the lessons, the karmic cycles, whatever you want to call it, we're here to learn. And if you see it as that, it becomes less personal. You take it less, demeaning to yourself. And that process is about taking your own ownership and power for who you are. That takes with your reactions and things that show up in your life. You got to take that ownership. And that's a really big part in your process of evolution. But in a sense, with these ET involvements, I started reading a lot of books years ago. I remember the first book I was introduced with UFOs and the Illuminati was this book called Behold a Pale Horse. And this guy was in my fire crew when I was becoming a wildland firefighter. I was with these really amazing people that would just give me different books. And this guy said he was in prison for like 10 years. And he said this one book that everyone just envied and wanted to get a hold of was this book called Behold a Pale Horse. And it's about this CIA naval intelligence officer who had all this information that the CIA didn't want to disclose, and he disclosed it. He basically said that he's seen these UFO sightings while he was out in the water. They come out of the water, and everyone was told not to say anything. And then he talked about the Illuminati, how the Illuminati was designed by this shadow government meant to control humanity, and keep us encaged within ourselves so they can be in power. And that was a really amazing book. I went along to read so many other books aside from that, but that was my introduction.
Yeah, I want to read it. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that book, this guy, he wrote in the beginning of the book, like, hey, I may not be alive after this book is published. And sure enough, he was driven off a cliff. Someone was chasing him, and he ended up surviving, but lost his leg.
Wow.
And then later, he ended up becoming missing, never was found again.
Right. And coincidentally, that happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think as I got further into, after my crash and burn process, some other books fell into my lap where it was actual more knowledge on ETs and their interaction with humanity. And all ancient civilizations had these, recognitions of, outside influence, from outer space or whatever. And one of those books was called The Law of One, The Raw Contact, which was a channeled book that really, if you want your mind twisted and transformed, this is the book that really took me to that next level.
Wow.
It's a story about this woman, and it was written in the 80s. This woman was a channel. She would be completely unconscious, and these two other men were asking questions because they realized when they would meditate, she would pass out, and this being would channel information through her. And so they decided to write a book about it. And so they would purposefully put her unconscious, and she would do it herself. She was willing to do it. And this extraterrestrial group called the Ra came through her, and they would ask questions. And it was an amazing book describing how the pyramids were made, from Hitler to Bigfoot to
Amazing.
to the human body, how it operates, to your energy centers of your body, how they operate, from understanding human evolution, how that works, how thought works, and goes into detail with how they would ask these questions and get direct information. And it seems strange, but when you're reading this book, it rings true. You know what I mean? That kind of discernment you're talking about, you know?
Your body's like, pay attention.
Yeah.
There's something here. There's something here. Wow. This subject is so fascinating. I love it. We're really going there today.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you with ETs, extraterrestrials being, I say interdimensional and not just higher dimensional, because I'm not sure where I stand yet with, are all ET encounters like pleasant? Like, I'm not sure. I've had a lot of sightings in my life. I grew up going camping all the time. So my family was always off-roading in our Jeep and camping. And so lots of unobstructed views of the sky. And collectively, we would see flying saucers. We would see things just like appear and then dart away. And then I've had super close encounters with a massive craft when I was in 7th grade. So 13, where you can't tell me that they don't exist, because I saw that. I saw it. I've seen a lot. I've seen dozens, but that one was the most prominent one that you can't convince me that doesn't exist. And so it's goofy to me that we're still arguing that, we're still labeling people as crazy or unwell. We're still judging people for having the knowledge, especially military. Like, are you kidding? The most advanced technology in the world, and they're being told not to say anything about it. And we're not trusting their experience. Like, it's a little, come on, guys. Like, we have to do better than that. But I tend to believe that they are more interdimensional and not necessarily higher dimensional, only because just like humanity, there's good and bad people. I think that my logic says, my discernment tells me that there's got to be a range also of non-human life form. There's got to be a range. But I don't know. Who am I? I'd be happy to discover that and to learn more about that. Within reason, now that I'm not giving permission to be visited, to be told, per se. You have to watch what you say, because the universe is like, oh, really? You want to know? Here you go. So within reason, we'll put that out there into the universe. But I do think that if you are open to see these things, you will see these things. Just like if you are open to trusting in your intuition, you will have more experiences in your life that allow you to either trust or not trust your intuition. So the readiness, the openness is like the first step in your ability to see. Like the guys that say, I'll believe it when I see it. It's like, all right, well, then you'll probably never see it. You'll probably never see it. Or you'll see it and it will be so shocking to your system that life after that will be very challenging for you, because it's so shocking. It just confronts everything that you thought to be true about life, that it can have a kind of a negative effect on you, because it's so shocking to your system, because you were unwilling to be open. You were just so closed off, unwilling to be open to the possibility. So openness to anything that's unseen, energetically, whether it's an ET, whether it's a spirit, whether it's an angel, the spirit guide, whatever it is, an ascended master, openness is the key. Because it's very arrogant and very narrow-minded to assert that this is it, that like we as humans are the ultimate kind of life form, is a really arrogant, self-centered place to be. And I'm just not that person. Of course, I feel like I have to believe in aliens because I talk to dead people.
I want to hear more about this spacecraft you saw.
Yeah. Okay, so I was, like I said, 13. I was in 7th grade. My family had just moved. I grew up in Southern California. We had just moved to Illinois, into a town called St. Charles. And it was a brand new house. It was being built. We had moved there and it was not quite finished. So we were living in a townhouse until it was done. But we moved in and it was cornfields in the backyard. It's a total
like
horror
movie
film.
signs.
Yeah, it's a total like horror film setup. We also had this beautiful pond in the yard. So it was, and we were the only, there was like 2 other houses built at this time. So it was brand new, not even graded. Like our lot was graded, but everything else was just open space and corn. And my room faced the back where the cornfields were. And one night I had been asleep and I just got like jolted out of bed, just woken up, which for me was very normal because of spirit visiting me all the time as a child. Rarely had a full night's sleep ever in my childhood. And so I woke up and I kind of was like, oh, here we go. Like, who's going to visit now? And immediately my dark room was filled with light. It was so bright. I was like, what? Like, I was so disoriented with how bright it was. And immediately I hit the ground. I jumped out of bed and hid on the ground because I was like, whatever this is, I don't want it to see me. Like they weren't already looking at me. And I crawled to the window. I had half curtains. So like the lower half of my windows were covered with curtains, but the upper half were exposed. And I remember, I don't know if I opened the curtains or if I stood up and peeked over the top, but I made eyes with this round craft that was, I swear, as big as a football field. It was so big, and it went way past the border of my house. It went way far back over the corn. It was so huge. But the thing that really hit my system was that it was silent, and I was like, but it's so bright. How? And it's so big. How is it not making any noise? And also no one else, I thought like the neighbors across the road would see it. I thought my family members would like wake up and make noise. No one saw it. So I'm standing there and it's dark in color, but it has hundreds of lights. And some looked like windows, like some looked to be square, kind of like on the, not quite the border of this round craft, but like a little bit above the border. But there were lots and lots of small lights all over the bottom of it. And it was low. It got really low to the ground, but not touching the ground. So I saw that it was hovering. And I had told myself, okay, I'm gonna go get mom. I'm gonna go get mom. I'm gonna crawl out of my room, get the door, open the door handle, and go get my mom. And by the time I kind of crouched back down, it had zipped away. It was
Holy shit.
completely gone. And my room went black immediately.
Damn.
Immediately. And I was like, well, there's no point in getting mom now. Like, it's gone. Like, she's just going to go, oh, you had a bad dream. Why'd you wake me up? Like, so I didn't go tell her. I didn't tell her until the morning. But that happened. And I was like, okay. And I had experiences with my family, like I said, at an earlier age, seeing a handful of objects kind of darting across the sky, but never this close to me. And I mean, I'll never forget it. It was gigantic. It was huge. And it lasted a couple minutes and then boom, absolutely gone. No noise, nothing, immediate darkness again, like it had never been there. So
that's wild. That's
Isn't that
awesome.
crazy?
That is crazy. I was just watching this video recently and I was talking to Haley about it, and it was a Brazilian podcast, and they were talking to these Brazilian tribal people, and these people were, I think it was the Hopi tribe, Hopi, and they had these headdresses, and they're just having a conversation, and the host is asking them, hey, have you ever heard of aliens? And they're like, what? I've never heard that word. And then they showed them a picture of these gray aliens, the ones with the big heads and the big eyes. And they're like, oh yeah, we know what that is. And they're like, well, what is it? And they're like, well, they live underground. And so they had realized what this was by seeing that thing. And they've seen it many of times. And in their traditions, they say that if you get too curious, if you play around with it, it can entrap your soul and bring it underground with them.
Whoa.
And they said that you need a really strong shaman to undo that.
Oh my gosh.
That was like their expression. But they called these people ant people. And this was their Brazilian Portuguese term of labeling what that was for them. And it's been known for thousands of years in their tribes of these beings living underground. And so there's been for eons of Native American tribes having these experiences as well with these people who live underground or these beings who live underground, even to the Aboriginals and all these ancient cultures, the Pygmies as well. They all know about this, you know. And so one other experience I've had was I was at a recording for this. My friend had a recording for this commercial. This guy was the producer. He was a Native American guy. And we were just like, you know, sitting around like the fire during a break and talking. And he was explaining that his tribe had known about these long, scaly creatures that would walk the prairies. And they were very aware of them. And they had a certain name for them. I forget what they had called them, but they would see these beings walking around. They're about 6 to 7 feet tall with scales, you know, and they've been referred to as lizard people, you know, and they also lived underground. And this was super fascinating hearing it from his perspective, because I've heard of like reptilian beings and reptile people. And it was interesting hearing the Native American perspective, because they've known about this stuff, you know, through culture and through tradition. And what was I going to say about the reptilian people?
I was just going to say, you know, it's only new to us.
Right.
These things are not new to any other civilization, any other culture. And we think that we have this superior, you know, outlook that it's crazy, that you must be hallucinating, or you must have been dreaming, or you must have been on drugs, or whatever it is. It's only new and unusual to us. But to every other culture, it's like prominent. It's depicted in every like pictograph, hieroglyph. It's everywhere. But, you know, it's us that are like, no. Those people were less intelligent. They were less, you know, creative or whatever it is. But really, no, they were more connected to spirit. They were more connected to self, because it was a matter of life and death, their survival. So they had to use all their spiritual gifts. They had to use their instinct, their insight, their wisdom to survive. And so, of course, they were dialed in, especially Native Americans. They were all, or any kind of tribal or culture, they were dialed in, because that's how they lived. That's how they survived. So it's so goofy that we discount, you know, all of this. It's just so goofy. It's so silly. But yeah, I think it's fascinating, the accounts of crafts going into the ocean or into the ground. And I love, you know, that tribe said, oh yeah, they're ant people. Like they live underground. It's like all of my experience of seeing anything otherworldly, we'll say ET, has been above ground. So that's really interesting that we're learning more and more about the underwater craft, or the ant people. That's wild to me.
Oh, this is what I was going to say is I read this book called The Way of the Shaman, and it's about an anthropologist who went down into the rainforest in Brazil and Peru and stayed there for quite some time. He just wanted to invest his time in learning about these people and their traditions. So part of their tradition, they had them take these medicines. One of them was the medicine of Jurema and the other medicine of ayahuasca. And so when he took ayahuasca with these people, they first had to have a trust factor with him until he actually ended up drinking ayahuasca. And his first ayahuasca experience was experiencing these reptile people who took him and took him underground, and then took him across to like the edge of his death and showed him what his life would be like if he were to cross this bridge, essentially. And after he was done with that, he ended up talking to the lead medicine man of that tribe, and he knew what he saw. And he asked him, well, what did you see that I saw? And this man was blind. And so he saw what he saw through the medicine. And he said, well, I've been seeing these people for quite some time. And he's like, well, how do you see them? You're blind. He's like, well, the inner vision of me has been opened up, so I can see these things without me opening up my actual eyes.
Wow.
Which I thought was pretty wild.
That is wild. Which is also amazing, because maybe that's the more powerful sight to have
Yeah.
versus physical seeing. What does that get you?
Totally.
A lot of confusion, a lot of doubt, a lot of, I don't know, very basic, one-dimensional sort of run-of-the-mill life. But to have the inner vision switch flipped on inside of you is like and whether you get there through medicine, through meditation, through EMDR, or the other types of therapy, hypnotherapy, doesn't matter. But the point is to awaken that inner sight that really helps you notice and see things that are there and present. And also, like I said in the beginning, observant of noticing the things that are missing. But that's wild. That's incredible.
Yeah, the first practice, I think for me, was the inner vision to visualize. And the way someone had taught me was like when someone says chair, the word chair, in your mind, do you see a picture of a chair or do you see the word chair? So the universal language speaks in pictographs and symbols. And that is the part of our inner vision of what we realize we have, so you could practice with this inner vision by giving yourself a motive to say, okay, I want to visualize a red bird. And immediately you can see that red bird. So it's truly amazing. We have this inner vision. And that is kind of like the concept of opening up your ancient eyes to realizing the true nature of who we are. And as we awaken to that. And I kind of want to segue into having people use the discernment. And there's two parts to this. It's discernment and judgment. Judgment is the lower frequency aspect of your false self making up a story to have you conflict upon something you're seeing and judging it. And that's a fear-based approach. And it's a lot of control involved to make you not alter the truest part of your being. Discernment is taking that inner knowing sense and having that resonate within your system, however it operates. And it takes practice, without a doubt. And the only thing the reason why I'm saying that is because I have come across some people who are claiming they're very spiritual. And this spiritual community is very strange. And there's a lot of pseudo spirituality in this, where I had met this girl and she was very she wasn't taking ownership of her problems and the things showing up in her life. She said, well, my spirit guide told me to do this. And I was just kind of caught off guard because she wasn't taking that ownership. Oh, this is actually a behavioral pattern that I have that's showing something deeper, and it's showing up in my life over and over and over. And so it put a halt to her actual work in life, which is learning the lessons of what we came here to do, right? And this can become a way of hiding and avoiding from who we are, and that is something I would say just be aware of when you come across people who say those things. It's just the same thing as just in any type of religion. It's like they would always spiritually bypass reality, to not taking true ownership. Oh, it's the sin in you, it's the evil in you that's doing that. No, it's actually a part of me that I need to look at. That's the reason why that's showing up in my life. Instead of just sweeping it under the rug and asking for forgiveness, well, you have to first have a greater understanding, a realization behind what's underneath. Because if you don't, it's going to reinvent itself in some other way or form in your life.
Exactly. It will never go away until you receive from it what it's meant to teach you. There is so much, the spiritual community is, I would say, not unlike, let's just use therapists as an example. There are good therapists and there are bad therapists. There are really skilled and intuitive, compassionate therapists. And then there are those that are burnt out over it. They can't hear another problem. And so they're just going to rush you through their session. So there's same in the spiritual community. There's a lot of people who, and I really started to feel this a handful of years ago. I was doing a lot of psychic fairs, holistic fairs, where I was a featured reader. And on one hand, I was really happy that there's a lot of people much more accepting of themselves and this kind of life. But there was also a huge disconnect where it didn't feel authentic to me. People calling themselves intuitive that really were not that intuitive. They just enjoyed telling people what to do. So there's a lot of, it's more of a persona versus an innately who they are. So that exists, and we have to presence that, because when you're seeking somebody to help you understand your own gifts, you have to use your judgment, you have to use your discernment, you have to use your intuition to feel out the energy of the person that you're seeking guidance and assistance from. And they have to be, I like, just for myself, I take what I do. Although it is me. I was born this way. Every aspect of my life revolves around me being highly, highly, highly intuitive. I have to heal myself, and healing is never done. So healing is an ongoing journey. I have to do that if I can channel any guiding information for my people, for my clients. And it's interesting because for years I didn't avoid healing, but I was really focused on growing my spiritual gifts. And so practicing regularly with all of my abilities, doing readings all the time, and emotional stuff of my own would bubble up. And I would just be like, yeah, I'll get to you later. Yep, I'll get to you later. And then it came to a point where I could not avoid it anymore. So the individuals that kind of don't see it within themselves, the universe will just bring it back up over and over and over again, not as a way to make you feel bad about the issues that you have to heal, but because they're asking to be healed. And so it's really important, people seeking guidance from somebody in the spiritual community, ask questions. Like, I don't mind if people are like, what's your journey been? Like, tell me. I'm not going to tell you details, but I'm going to go, yeah, man, life is a motherfucker. You gotta heal your shit. If you want, any openness for your intuitive stuff to drop in and kind of ignite within you, you have to heal. And let me tell you a little bit about mine. And often in my readings, my sessions with people, there will be a commonality. So I will have a personal, I'll relate to something that you're going through, or you'll relate to something that I just said about my own journey. And number one, it's beautiful because that builds humanity, and that shows that we're all connected and no one's doing life alone. But it also, it shows me as the one that's guiding and channeling the information for you. It shows me that you're ready to receive it. It also lets you know, okay, she's not full of shit. Like, she's been through a lot. She's walked the walk. She's been messy. She hasn't got it right all the time, but she always comes back to her intuition. And that's what I want to do for myself. So it's really important. I think that's a really good thing to bring up about people in the spiritual community. Also, I want to say this too, because I keep finding this keeps coming up in sessions. Sometimes we get addicted to healing.
Right.
So we're just channeling some frenzied energy from something that we want to move away from, whatever other type of addiction. We're just turning that into healing. And we're just going. And we're like grabbing all these modalities really, really fast. And we're not giving any room in between to integrate, to sit with it, to let our body adjust to the wisdom, to adjust to the awareness. We're just chasing the next aha moment. We're chasing the next moment of clarity that drops in because it's so good. It feels so good. It becomes the new high for us. And I always caution against that because nothing is sticking. Nothing is landing in the body. We're not giving the body we're not giving it time to bloom. And so
it's very well put.
Yeah, we have to go a little bit slower. The fact that you desire to heal and you're doing something about it is enough. You don't have to chase every modality. You don't have to do, an ayahuasca trip in South America and, a 2-week festival that cost $8,000 in the desert, like in the same year. Like, you don't have to do all of that at once. You don't have to see me as a Reiki master or a medium spiritual coach. You don't have to see me 18 times a year. You don't have to do that. See me once every few months. Have a trip, with medicine, or start learning meditation and do that for a few months. Let your body adjust slowly. And remember, the body doesn't like change. So if we want anything to stick, we have to introduce it slower and repeatedly, consistently, but at a slower pace to give ourselves, like I said, give all of that time to bloom in your system. That's That's another thing that I really feel like I like to caution people about.
No, that was so well put. And I truly believe that as well. Like, I think there's a definitely guidance to having a successful, intuitive life, and I think part of that is, number one, slow down. Slow down. This rat race is always going to be here. Things are always going to be moving fast. When you slow down, your intuition comes through and you can gradually float with ease with all the information you need to know. It's going to come to you, and just be graceful with it, and graceful with yourself, with your wounds as well. Your wounds are always going to be there. That's why in ancient Hindu mythology, they call it the samskara. It's a wounding, right? Leave it alone for a second. Let it heal on its own. If you keep fucking with it and picking with a scab, you're going to create more bleeding and more of a wounding. So just leave it alone for a second. When it's ready to be integrated, it will come to you. So that being said, like, just gracefully go through this. And number two, I think is to have the practices that are going to guide and sharpen your skills. And meditation is great because for everyone wants to just rid the mind of all the noise, and it also regulates the nervous system. And so when you're doing these things, it now creates a conduit. In ancient yogi practices, they saw the spinal cord as the channel of information. It's like an antenna. And so this is how information comes through. And so when you're meditating, it allows this antenna to start beeping and receiving information as you're turning the dials for a radio station or a frequency you're tuning to. And so this channel is referred to as somewhat of like a conduit, right? You're bringing in this information. So that conduit, and it gets larger and larger as you meditate. So your nervous system is not as eradicated as this conduit increases, and it can hold more information. So that concept is pretty interesting because there's a man, Native American medicine man, and there's a story of him. It refers to as like the hollow bone. And he saw himself as a hollow bone. And he says his teachings are derived from the fact that when you create a hollow bone within, you were able to hold more information, more divine guidance, and he would be able to see the future. He'd be able to heal his tribe whenever there would be a plague of some sorts. And so he teaches about this hollow bone needs a clearing, and it needs to be cleared with all the gunk, all of the trash we feed it. And so your path of life is to constantly work at clearing those imbalances and just the murkiness of what can be inside that system, inside that conduit of the self. And so I think when you're working with some of the practices, it allows for growth for the conduit, and then more intuition can come through. And number three is just have fun with your life, because the addiction to healing is just another addiction. You're just replacing it with something else. And I got caught up in that. I think I had so much to clear it all at once, and I tried to take all of it on, and I got burnt out. And so burnt out where I lost joy in my regular life.
Right,
You know what I mean? So I'm very glad you brought that up. It's super powerful the way you're expressing like the splendidness of life, which is what we get lost in the rat race, right? And we can get lost in the rat race of our own evolution.
Well, and you actually have more control over the wisdom that drops in, the clarity that you are emerging into receiving when you decide to slow it down, because life is noisy and busy and fast. And that's the point of getting on that path to heal, is to choose the pace for yourself. And so if you're continuing to go as fast and as hard in your healing life as you were in your regular life, well, there's not a lot of separation. So your body doesn't even recognize this is actually, could be a benefit, because you're just going from one thing to the next. You're not choosing to slow it down. Give yourself a lot of self-praise and credit for deciding to heal. Because first of all, the choice to change is such celebratory energy that we pass over and don't give ourselves credit for. Like when you decide to change, that's a huge energy shift. Arguably, the biggest energy shift that you will have in your life is when you decide to be different. Because for as many years, up to that point, you held the belief that this is who you were and this was your lot in life. So the fact that you've reached the stage of deciding to be different and change, celebrate that moment as long as you can. It doesn't mean celebrate and stay still. Celebrate, but let that self kind of praise energy guide you to what modality speaks to you the most, and go slow with the process. Again, we also need to shift out of the intensity and chaos of real life and be really focused on present moment. Present moment me. What does present moment me need me to do right now? What is the present moment asking of me? And we will miss that if we are just, biting off way more than we can chew in the healing world. And so we're not honoring our body. We're not listening to our body, which is the point of healing, is listening, honoring. And we can't listen or honor when it's go, go, go. So we have to slow it down. And to celebrate the decision to heal as the most profound moment, because up until that point, like I said, we all thought we would be this way forever. And the fact that you're deciding to do it differently, it was an act of God to get you to change. So we have to celebrate that more and slow it down.
Yeah. When I did my Cambo training, it's a very challenging training to do. I mean, you're basically doing, you're there for a week and you're doing more Cambo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the things my teacher had told us was celebrate yourselves for this moment, because you really went through a lot, and because you're able to get through this, you can treat other people because you've done it. But don't forget to celebrate who you are. And I'll never forget that when she told me that, because for years, I did not celebrate myself. And I treated myself so bad with my inner conversation with myself, and I just remember feeling that, because all the work I was doing in that week had to do with how I treated myself and all the stuff I've suppressed for years that I had to look at, and I was so happy with her saying that. It made me feel so empowered to, number one, take control of how I talk to myself and how I treat myself. And that's a huge perspective change, and how I navigate my life and how I show up for others, to treat things with more grace and compassion. And that's still something I have to unravel, because it's a pattern of living that I was never guided or taught to do that, and it takes time and patience. And so over the course of doing very difficult things in my life, I realized it's time to let that all go, and I was always under the veil of believing I had to work really hard for something in order for me to gain it, which was a false belief system in itself. Challenges make you resilient, yes. And you do need a little bit of drive and things to kind of guide you along the way. But do we need challenging things so difficult that, it breaks us and takes us to that breaking point? I don't really believe. I think that's a belief system for humanity to look at, because over a period of time, it has made me stronger, yes. But I started realizing I was whipping myself and constantly believing this perfectionistic view of myself was what I needed to obtain. And that was like this, I could never value the imperfections of myself. And as I realized that's what needs the most healing, is the imperfections, instead of disassociating from believing that that's not really needed in my life,
Yeah, that I have to kill that part of me.
Yeah.
The part of you that needs, to extend more grace or compassion. It's like, that's the part that it's like it's the death of that old self or whatever. And really that's the other thing about healing that I've realized it for myself, but love to share it, is the parts of you that you're trying to heal are the very parts that exist to set you free and to also give you the most self-love. Like if you can love yourself in all of your, imperfections, then you can love yourself always. Because if you love it when it's icky, then for sure you're going to love it when it's good. And we need that contrast. So yes, we learn through adversity, we learn through challenges, and those are necessary, that contrast, to have something to compare it to and to strive for. But it's unchecked kind of power if then we just race for the perfection side of it. And really, it's the imperfection that is the training period for us. Like if we can love ourselves when it's like, I want to heal. I don't know what I have to heal, but I'm sick of being this way and I hate how I feel. Start with loving the fact that you hate yourself, like hate that part of yourself. Love that, because it's that thing that's going to teach you the most. And it's going to be that awareness of all of those imperfections, or what we would label imperfections. Cause I wouldn't even label that, I wouldn't even call it an imperfection, but we have to label it something. So we'll just say that, because it's not imperfect, because it leads to you loving yourself, which is the perfect state to be in. That's the perfect vibrational state to be in for joy and happiness, to attract all the things that you want, to be the best version of yourself, is the frequency of love. So if you can figure out how to start speaking kinder to yourself, or not hating or rejecting the part of you that you can't stand, but start to show up and say, you know what? I've been talking shit to you this whole time. I actually love you because I know it's you that's going to help me heal. I know it's you that's going to help me change. That's something that we all can start doing now. You don't need a therapist. You don't need a shaman for. Those are those little things. They're not quite little, they're huge, but those are the things that we can start with. So yeah, it's loving, speaking kindly, and saying, I'm glad that you've pushed me to the limit to get me to want to heal, because it's this very thing that's going to teach me the most about myself. And it's perfect. It's beautiful. And the other thing too is, once we identify those things that we want to heal, we can start to have gratitude for them ever existing at all, because it's that becomes the catalyst to release and let go and heal and forgive and move on. We can then look at that and go, if I wasn't this way, or if that hadn't happened to me, I would never be where I am now. And so we owe it to ourselves to use the thing that we can't stand, or the trauma, or whatever it is. We owe it to ourselves to start injecting gratitude in it, because that is the thing that's going to unlock a beautiful life for all of us. So we can start giving that gratitude now.
Very well said.
Thank you.
People need to hear that message, because I think there's just improper guidance, through this game board of life, and if you don't know the rules of the game, how are you supposed to play? Yeah. And it takes a lot of siphoning through all the bullshit, and you really are your own compass on your guiding force to find what rings true within you. That's why I keep mentioning these practices, because they're so important, because you're gaining this influence of your own discernment and that attunement to what rings true. Mm-hmm. And so as you walk through your life and these avatars are coming to you in this path, you'll meet great teachers and you'll meet great enemies, but they're all teaching you the same thing.
Exactly. They're all messengers. They're all there for you.
But the guidance is so important. If you have teachers and mentors who can help you learn the rules of the game, it's so valuable. And I think that's why I strive for this podcast platform, to help people with that, because it can be really hairy, to try to get through if you're not knowing how to get through it. And it can be detrimental, to where people take their own life. Yeah. And that's where I draw the line. That is not an option. And I think over a period of time, I was there at that point where I was broken to the point of wanting to do that. It cannot happen. Yeah. It was not a choice for me. It came down to me making that decision for myself. Like, no, that's actually not the way. I'm going to get through this. There is hope. And I just needed, I'm very fortunate that I had people who landed in my life at the right times, where it was like, okay, I've come to this breaking point, and this person held my hand along the way to teach me, So I think the biggest thing is like it comes down to our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't have any real, I guess, instructions on how to navigate your consciousness. And so when you take charge of realizing, hey, I'm here to set a precedent for how I'm going to live my life, that's when things start changing for your momentum and how you walk in this game. So I wanted to talk about solar flares, but we're kind of hitting like a 2-hour mark here. So I don't know if we're going to hit that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we're going to close.
We'll save that for next time.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
But I know some people have reached out to you through the podcast, which is pretty rad.
I know. It's been wonderful. Yes.
So if anyone wants to reach out to you, if you mind talking about like how they can reach you and so forth.
I'm most reachable through Instagram. My name is at Medium Lisa Mercier, Mercier. And then in that I have links to book a session with me. I offer Reiki, intuitive readings, which is psychic readings, but I use the word intuitive because it's much more than, it's not like fortune telling. That's a kind of a myth about psychics. I'm a medium, so connecting with loved ones on the other side. I'm a spiritual coach, so individuals who are looking for guidance with their own abilities, their own intuition, their own clairs, their own, hey, what does it mean when, I always have deja vu, or can you help me understand this? And I teach based on my own training that I received, but also my life, since this has been with me for my whole life. And then I also do past life regression. So you can book a session with me through Instagram at Medium Lisa Mercier.
Sorry. Thank you, Lisa, again.
Thank you.
Returning to just open up way more interesting conversations.
I love the space to talk. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Take care.
It's time for Crab Lives.